Hello, welcome to the Culture Roundtable, brought to you by Culture and Sports. We have an exciting group of panelists here today to talk about athlete development. Now, athlete development means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And I'm not going to start off the panel by stating what I believe it means athlete development or culture and sports or sports in general believes athlete development is. This is going to be true discussion from our own backgrounds and experiences of what we believe athlete development is, what the best way to develop athletes currently is, and what we hope to achieve in the future as practitioners in the sports sphere. So, the first person I'd like to introduce you to is Kyle. Kyle, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your experience and what athlete development means to you?
Yeah, Kyle Stark, currently have a coaching and leadership consulting business, working with high speed leaders and coaches, sport, military business around the world, and spent 16, 17 years in professional baseball before that in front office, primarily on the player development side, coached in college before that. So I think athlete development in general, that this is this fight of as we're chasing performance, how do I make sure that I'm constantly trying to get better every single day in that process? And I think that's the tension, the fight for all of us as we navigate that.
All right, Janine, nice to have you back as well. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everybody. I'm Janine D'Anniballe. I am a psychologist and currently the director of psychological health and performance at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Um, and did you want us to say what development means to us?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So obviously, as a psychologist, I'm thinking about how people develop psychologically, in particularly in my world, how student athletes or athletes develop from the mental, emotional part of themselves through sport. So excited to talk about that.
And Ashley, this is your first time doing an event with Culture and Sports. Can you please introduce yourself and what your thoughts on athlete development and what it means to you are?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jeremy. So my name is Ashley Goodman. I am Director of Player Development for University of Kansas football. I'm going into my fifth season in 4 years I've been here. And what I really believe athlete development or player development, what we call it, is of course the holistic training of an individual, but really the scope that I focus on with our guys is both the personal and professional, but making sure that they understand that this is a business. And when they sign on that dotted line, what are they signing up for? To maximize the opportunity that they can play at a high level in college or beyond. So I look at it from a business point of view as well as a holistic training.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ashley. I want to start the first question with you, Janine. What are your organization's goals when it comes to athlete development, and how did your organization arrive at those goals?
Oh boy. Okay, well, we have multiple goals, so I'll pick maybe one to start with, and then we can, but for example, we really frame our work with student athletes as helping in identity development. So obviously, sport and athletes can build a strong sense of identity around their sport, right? Who they are, what makes them tick, what motivates them, what brings them joy about their sport. So that is our goal, is to kind of develop and help athletes enhance that. That's on the positive side. Unfortunately, as we know, there's something that's a reality in sport, which is things like injury or forced retirement, or where then identity development goes in a different direction. So helping our part of our goals is how we help athletes develop that identity outside of sport as well, and to balance that, to know who they are. Say someone has a terrible catastrophic knee injury and is forced to retire from sport, obviously that can create a lot of psychological distress if their identity is around that themselves as performer. So one of our goals is how we can help the whole person, right? Not just the athlete, but the whole person still thrive in their world. So that's a big part of my department's goal around this.
Oh, that's very interesting that athlete identity was one of the first things that you discussed, Janine. In my experience, and by the way, I'm Jeremy Piasecki. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the executive director of culture and sports, and I've coached for a very long time in youth sports, professional sports, and also at the Olympic level or Olympic preparation level, national sports programs and whatnot. But athlete identity, Janine, is a very important topic right now, but it hasn't always been. And you've been a practitioner for a long time. Has athlete identity changed over time, or are people just becoming a little more aware of it?
Well, I think both actually. I mean, because now I think there's more competing demands in identity. It used to be I'm an athlete, I play this sport, this is my identity. Now, in the world of NIL revenue share, sometimes an athlete's identity now is more as business person. I mean, like Ashley was saying, like this is a whole different part of identity now. Maybe it's like entrepreneurship or pressure to be a breadwinner. Like that maybe wasn't as prominent 10 years ago. So that's another aspect of identity that we're weaving in to help build capacity and skills around.
I
Yeah.
think to
Now, Kyle.
piggyback off
Oh, sorry. Go
that,
ahead.
oh,
Mhm.
I was going to say to piggyback off that is really 20, 30 years ago, they, elite athletes at this level were not being promoted to think about really anything but to achieve on the field or, where their sport was. So, now we're saying it's good to have something unique about you. If you like fishing, promote that, because with NIL and with your brand, you getting you having a sense of identity outside of the sport can also bring in other people to become a fan or to follow you or to again bring more revenue. So I think in the sense of our identity, today our athletes are encouraged to think about themselves outside of sport. And so
Mhm.
I think that's where identity foreclosure still is a big component of, elite athletes or athletes in general. And I go over that quite heavily with our guys, but I think the encouragement does help them think about themselves outside of their sport too.
Mhm.
I love this topic. And by the way, I'm going to steal Janine's line of forced retirement instead of fired, released, cut, whatever else. So I like that. The, you know, I think the thing for me that's interesting, like I think we've become hyper. I think we've always wrestled with this on this journey but I think we're becoming more in tune with it because I think we're doing less identity, just general identity, foundational work with our young people so that these pressures of identifying as a potential college star professional athlete are happening earlier and earlier, so we don't have a foundation of who you are beyond sport. I think that a lot of these things of general character formation, Ashley touched on, that there's things beyond sport that matter to you. I think those things were part of our upbringing, that as the pressures of sport have continued to happen earlier and earlier, those things maybe aren't happening. So now all of a sudden we're like, oh, geez, we need to do some identity development with our 18 to 22-year-olds or 18 to 30-year-olds. That, again, I think we've always wrestled with it, but I think some of the foundation that was laid is not being laid as well. So we have to do it at maybe a later spot in their development.
Now,
Yeah.
Kyle, let me ask you a question since we deviated from my original question to Janine because I was so interested in athlete identity. how, when you were at the Pirates and other organizations, how did your organization create goals, and also who was involved in that process and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like identity, that's a big question. We can go a lot of different directions, but I think as we started thinking about a lot of research that shows goals matter, I think we both oversimplify and also overcomplicate that process. So that's a whole nother question of goal setting and how does it fit and what does it look like for each individual? Because I think there's a lot of variance into that. But the idea of having a goal mentality is something that permeates all elite people as they grow and get better, that they've got this sense of aspiring and want to move forward. So then what does that look like for the individual? And not just specifically within a specific isolated part of their identity, if you will. So as you think about as an athlete, that might be as a person first and foremost, as a player second, as a teammate third, and to see, okay, what do these goals look like in these areas? I think two other components of this goal setting process that learned over time of trial and error is forcing a goal on somebody never works. The best we can get from that is compliance. At the same time, our coaches, our leadership are expected to shepherd people through this because we don't know what we don't know. And so as a coach, as a leader, whatever else, how do I help them find goals that are productive for them so that they can take ownership of those and that are aimed at some organizational objectives? None of us are operating in isolation. We're all part of something bigger in ourselves. We got to make sure we continue to remind ourselves of that. And then I think the other part of it is to make sure that these goals work for that person in their journey, and to make sure that we don't get, I think we can get really good at compartmentalizing us and isolating aspects to make sure that these are aimed at the ultimate outcome, and not just have a bunch of individual goals in different areas that we hope all come together magically, that we are striving both big picture, what fires us up and gets us excited, but then what are some more process goals along the way to help us move forward?
No, thank you for that, Kyle. And Ashley, with your organization, does the coach at University of Kansas, make all the goals when it comes to athlete development, or are more people involved with that than just the head coach there?
I would say it's a little bit of a combination. One, Coach Leipold is known for, taking programs that are really have been losing programs and giving them, breath, giving them some sort of chance. So I think for his background, he understands that fundamental foundation off the field is important, and it was one of the reasons why I accepted the job. I tell many people this, that I wasn't going to accept this job. Never worked with this staff or Coach Leipold before I got here, but I tell people that I wasn't going to accept a position that the life skills or the workshops that I organized and the game plan for holistic training was not going to be mandated for everyone to attend. So if a head coach was not going to put his foot down and say, no, this, everyone is going to attend these workshops, then I really was not, interested in working for that coach. And that's hard because a lot of programs across coast to coast, and I know this firsthand, is that they do optional, or it's kind of, in out, depending on where the wind is blowing for that head coach. And so that was not an option for me to work with. So a little bit taking his philosophy, taking Coach Leipold's methods and on how he's rebuilding a new program. And then I will take the foundation of what the NFL establishes for all 32 teams to get done before the start of season. And that's how I blend the two. So I take mandatory programming from the NFL, which I was there before I got here. Still think that they are considered the gold standard in this space. when it's dealing with athlete development or football. So take their criteria and then implement it with Coach Leipold's vision and other attributes that he wants for us to engage in. And so that's how I blend it to get both worlds.
Now, Ashley, what does success look like when it comes to athlete development in your organization?
Well, great question. I think one, if you're asking me personally, success is that a head coach is mandating that these workshops are critical and mandated. If you did not get that, that is my key thing, is that a head coach is mandating that they are getting personal and professional education and resources available. Then the next thing for the program holistically, of course, we're in a business that wins and losses matter. So that is one that we have to put on the book is where our record is. And like I said, Coach Leipold is known for taking programs that had not been really relevant and trying to get them into a space of being competitive. So record is going to be critical. Now with NIL, with the portal, with everything kind of changing in college, retention's a big thing also for us on how to measure success. Are we keeping majority or a foundation of our guys in-house? They're not jumping ship. They're not, deciding to go elsewhere for money or for whatever other reasons. And then the last thing is personal and professional growth, both individually and team. And those could be, we are a very detailed oriented team when it comes to markers. So we know who the first 5 in, who the last 5 in, who's the first 5 on the field, who's the last 5, who's missing supplements, who's not on time, who's missing tutoring. So we measure that based off of if we can eliminate MAs, under 24. So for a week of preparation, if we can get under 24 MAs, then we have 100% chance of winning on Saturday. If we have above 38 MAs on a week, during a week of preparation, we will get an L that week. And then when it comes to in between that 24 to 38, it's kind of a hit or miss depending on where we're playing 4 quarters at. So again, that's how we're measuring success, is really looking across the board with guys handling their business in the classroom, in the community, and taking care of what they need to do in the building.
Now, Kyle, currently in your role, you work with a lot of coaches and just leaders in general. What does success look like with those organizations and those leaders, but also reflecting back on your experience in Major League Baseball and coaching college as well? What did success look like for you when it came to athlete development?
Yeah, I mean, I love Ashley touched on winning. I think there's a reason why they keep score. There's a reason why we get into sport, so that that idea, the standard is the standard, resonates. That they the game has told us what matters, and how we do that. Now, I think our job as coaches and leaders is to create the environment to then decide, okay, what's going to be our recipe for success? What's our process? What's our play, if you will? Ashley gave some really good examples with Coach Leipold in terms of how he does it and what that looks like in the program. And then so within that, then as you've got some clear markers, some clear indicators of success, some clear non-negotiables that matter to us, that if we feel like if we do these consistently, it increases our chances of success, our chances of winning. And then being able to tailor that to individuals. Okay, what's my role within that? What are the things that matter to me? And then ultimately, we want to see growth. We want to see improvement, which I think at the end of the day, development, I think a lot of times we compartmentalize it in different areas, and really it's are we getting better in this journey? The highs, the lows, the whatever else, are we continuing to see a general trend line in the direction that we want to go? And so whether you're reached the pinnacle and you've won, the question is what's next? how do we keep getting better? Or whether you're really struggling in a rough spot, the question's how do we keep getting better? But it's this constant pursuit of growth.
Janine, does success look the same for you and your organization, or does it look a little bit different from where you sit?
It looks different. This is why I love having such diverse, representation on the panel, because keep in mind, so I'm the director of essentially a counseling center that's embedded in athletics, right? So we have athletes that come to us that we see for individual kind of counseling, and then we also work with teams, right? More in the mental performance realm. So it's really interesting. We measure development on the individual basis for the athletes that come to see us on, are they improving on their presenting problem, right? If they're presenting problems, anxiety, are they getting better? Depression, getting better? If a relationship issue is that resolving in a way that's satisfactory so we have the very like individual measurement of their challenge and seeing how that's developing or changing, hopefully in a good direction. And then for our work with the teams, similar to what Kyle was saying, like we're measuring on performance. So if we're working with, say, the basketball team and we're working on developing confidence, just working with athletes on confidence development, right? We talk, and that's a more kind of phenomenological measurement, right? We talk to the athlete. Do you feel more confident? The coach, do you see more confidence out of this player? Is this player behaving in a way that's showing that? And then so we measure that sport performance that way. So super different, but I think all similar in some ways.
Now, Janine, when your success looks different, because you're focused on the athlete, are you focused on the athlete just being able to get out there on the court or the field or in the pool to be able to perform at the highest levels, or are you looking more towards success for that person individually and holistically, like through their whole future life?
Yeah, we're looking much more holistically. And what we find, I mean, no surprise, this is no big revelation, but like when someone feels balanced emotionally, mentally, their performance is going to be better, right? It just works that way. So, for instance, if an athlete comes in and says, yeah, I want to improve my time in this event, we might start there and work specifically on that, but inevitably there are some other issues that might be at play that are impacting the performance in the race, and then we go there, right? So we're very fluid. We'll meet the athlete where they are, what they present with, but oftentimes it's a holistic perspective that we treat and try to develop.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Janine.
Yeah.
Kyle, what potentially are some roadblocks that might hinder or slow down reaching success, like not only for the organization and the team, but for coaches and athletes as well?
Yeah, I think human beings, we're messy and bring our own stuff to the table, and we're all a product of the environment we've been in and the product of the environment we're in. So I think all of those things, can create some stumbling roadblocks to this. There's a friend of mine that I think Ashley knows as well, Tim Elmore, who talks about this idea of the scene we find ourselves in, which is what society says matters. And I think if you think about this in terms of what society says matters, which again, we're a product of society to some extent, and then those very things that society prioritizes today actually run 100% counter to what peak performance and great development looks like. So Tim's 5 things, the essence seen as speed. We want things fast, which means we see slow as bad. Well, development is slow and takes a long time, and it's not linear, and there's highs and lows and everything that goes into that. The C is convenience. We want things easy. Well, development's hard, and a lot of hard work goes into it, and we're going to face a lot of adversity. The first E is entertainment. We want things fun and exciting. And while I think our job as a coach is to create a more fun, joyful environment, there's still a lot of just boring, mundane, hard not fun aspects to growth and getting better. The N is nurture. We want things safe. Well, the reality is we have to take risks in order to get better. And then the last E is entitlement. We feel like we deserve this as opposed to have to go work for it. And so I share all that in terms of that's the environment we're operating in. And the very recipe for great development is the exact opposite of that. So as a coach or a leader, how do I combat those messages and create an environment where our ego doesn't hijack the process, that we're willing to trust the people involved, that we're willing to risk, that we're willing to try, that we're willing to see results as feedback to make adjustments and learn and grow. And that's not just for the athlete, it's also for the coach or leader as well, who can bring those same challenges to the equation and hijack it. As a coach or leader, I'm going to talk about development mattering. And then that record, that win or loss, can be reflected on my ego, and all of a sudden I can hijack this process as well. So this tension we're in of what the world says matters versus what the recipe is for development, and how am I navigating that as a group of imperfect people, every single day.
I love that, Kyle. Yeah. I love that frame. What's that called again? The
scene. So Tim Elmore does a lot of work on generational differences, which he's really good to hit on, that this isn't about kids these days. This is the environment we are in, which I always say, hey, if you don't like the kids these days, we have to look in the mirror as parents, coaches, leaders, whatever else. We've created this environment, and we're all susceptible to these same things. But I think it frames out for me that the very things the world says matter are the exact opposite of what matters in great development. And so that's the fight I have as a coach or leader for myself internally, but also in the environment I'm trying to create every single day.
I actually, myself and our OC, we're big fans of Tim, and we're like, we need to bring him in. He needs to come in and speak. And I think, to Kyle's point, he does hit on the generation. And this is during our time period, we are dealing with so many multiple generations under one roof. And, from our head coach, who is definitely not a millennial, to, our Gen Zs and now below, that's going to be a mixture of everyone's environment, trying to then communicate, get on the same page. And that is very challenging because, again, the baby boomer is going to be like, nope, this is how we did it. And then, so again, we're really needing to take a look in the mirror, as Kyle said, not only with a 20-year-old, but with that 65-year-old that's trying to continue to lead, multiple different people.
Wow.
Now, Janine, let's talk about roadblocks more in the athlete sense. And I know you work with athletes a lot. What are some of the roadblocks? Maybe they're societal driven or cultural or family driven. Maybe they're team dynamics and culture. What are some of the roadblocks that you see a lot of athletes deal with, whether you want to use individual examples or just overall roadblocks that you see?
Oh boy, there's a lot. I will say just increased amount of pressure pressure. And I think it's the perfect storm of external pressure already from kind of type A driven people, right? Who already just naturally put pressure. They're driven, right? They're motivated to thrive, which is positive. But then you combine that with external pressure of whether, like you said, family units, media, social media, it's just like, whoa, then it becomes like too much pressure. A little bit of pressure is motivating. It's like that ideal amount of arousal, right? That gets you to perform. And then it can easily go into way too much that leads to more of a freeze or a shutdown. So that comes to mind. And another thing that comes to mind is the concept, we know of burnout. I think so many of our student athletes start early in their sport, they play their sport. I think about gymnasts or swimmers who are training and competing year round, and you just have the year round with no significant breaks. And then you combine that with pressure, just leads to burnout. And as we know, burnout is so serious. It is not something where somebody can say, "Oh, I'm just going to take a weekend off of training." It's like, no, it is I talk about burnout as a full body experience, mental, emotional, physical, that takes real time to heal from. So, uh, in development, in athlete development, we talk about the needs for breaks, the needs for rest, the need for balancing the sport maybe with something else. Because I just think once you hit that burnout, it's really hard to recover from. So those are two that come to mind, Jeremy, for me.
And what do you see, Ashley, through your work when it comes to burnout? As Janine started talking about, what do you do for athletes? And I know you're kind of trying to herd everyone in the right direction with what you're doing, but how do you address burnout not only early on, but how do you address it when it's eminently there, when you have athletes that are struggling just to wake up in the morning? How do you identify and address that?
Yeah, I think it's multiple to that question. I think one, before I got here, this program was not utilizing any of the resources that KU had offered when it went to mental health or performance. They weren't in the building. The previous staff just were not utilizing. And so, again, it wasn't encouraged for student athletes for football. I'm only speaking for football, to really seek out that unless they were just, on their own finding that. Now, what I have done, what I've seen is this was a whole other thing. Like I said, my two big ticket items that I was not going to accept a job was one, that the workshops that we would do are mandated, and that we brought in a clinical sport psych, and that was to the point where I was working with Green Bay, and it made such a difference because at that point in the NFL, there was only a third of NFL teams that even had a full-time sport clinical psych in the building. Now they needed about 8 to 12 hours, what the league mandated each program to have a week. But Green Bay was like, nope, we're going all in. We will hire. And I believe that does make a difference. Now that I have incorporated our services here through, she's with us at practice, games, in our building. They can schedule appointments in our building or across campus if they're not feeling that they want to be still in this building. They can. And that was really a thought process that I wanted to stop this thinking of that we only need to perform well when we're physically ready. And a lot of it was based off of just getting ahead of it, teaching them QPR, talking about mental health and what it did for us holistically as athletes, and then having the downfall. When we talk about suicide rates among this age group, and football being one of the highest, I want them to understand that they're not eliminated from these situations or from feeling like this, and they don't need to do it alone. And so I think getting ahead of it, having open dialogue. I'm very open with our guys about their minds and their health. So really just trying to get ahead of that. But I will say we are all year round, at least with pros, like the NFL, they get away from the building and not see each other. We are with each other day in and day out. And so the longest point that our guys will have off is currently right now.
Yeah.
And they have about 20 days. They have 20 days before they report back. We kick off June 1 that we start pretty much training back again. And then we will have another 6, 7, 9 days. And then we're full go again. Like we're all year during that period of time. And it's a lot. It's a lot to ask, an 18 to 21-year-old our staff, our coaches, like it is a lot. I don't know how it gets better with giving them more time off, but they will have to. I know they're looking at rearranging spring ball, maybe giving more time. During the summertime. But again, when this is about money and we're trying to pay for stadiums and facilities and everyone else is, trying to make their money, it's going to be hardcore, and we're going to have to, buckle up. That's why I'm very honest with our guys. I say this is not for everyone. You may think you love the sport, and you may, but this level and this is not for everyone. You really have to think long and hard, because then you get into it and you're like, this is not what I was really thinking or what I, had in mind. If I'm not the starting X, Y, and Z, that's a whole other element, that they're the big, they're the dude coming out of high school. They're the 4-star or 5-star. And then they come here and they're just like Joe Smo. And so now they got to prove again. And that's a hard thing for young individuals, because they want to instant. It's like, oh, I worked, oh, I did this perfectly, oh, I did this for a week. But it's about the consistency, and then the overtime and beating someone else out. So again, there's just a lot of elements to burnout, but I think mental health is a huge component that more programs need to focus on.
Yeah, Kyle and Janine, I saw lots of facial expressions while Ashley was going. I know both of you have lots of things to add here.
Yeah, I love just listening to both perspectives. I think the reality of it's not for everyone, and having to make sense of that for us. We weren't all created to play in the big leagues, play at the highest levels, whatever else. So I think that reality is a part of it. I think as Janine was talking about the pressure piece, well, if this pressure is not my pressure and it's everybody else's pressure, I'm gonna burn out. Again, that's part of that, of coming to grips with me and my journey. We used to always joke around that, every athlete's got mommy and daddy issues, all great parents, but at some point I have to make this my career, my pursuit, and making sense of that. So I think there's an element of that, as Janine was talking about, that it's a holistic, burnout's a holistic thing. We had talked with our guys about, hardcore stress requires hardcore recovery. Am I as in tune with that as I am with the stresses, which typically as athletes, we're not. Ashley's talking about, as coaches, what do we do? More. And that's part of this. But can I be more intentional with more off time, more intentional with more outlets? Can I be more intentional with freeing guys up to, we'll work with leaders and talk about, you have to have a third thing. You've got your professional thing, you got your family thing, you got to have a third thing. There's got to be something that allows an outlet for you. I think that the last thing I'll just share, as both Ashley and Janine were talking about this journey that we're on, is I think it's really easy for us to treat the process. We'll say that, hey, we're in the people business, but yet we will treat everybody involved as robots, machines, parts of a cog. And it's not to say that this is going to be easy, but I just have to continue to try to be honest. And for a coach and a leader, it starts with them. The answer is not, there's always something else you can do. At some point, I've got to decide what's most important, what's the best use of my time. I was laughing as Ashley was talking about, you're going to spend, my youngest son plays college football. We see him essentially 3 or 4 weeks of the year. The rest of the time and I used to joke around with our guys when when I was working in professional baseball every day. It's like, no, we need some space from each other. Like at the end of 9 months, I don't need to hang out with you more. Now, have I created an environment where individuals are taking ownership of their development, that they are continuing, or do I have to control all the inputs? And if I have to control all the inputs, it's really tough to be there. And then I'm not really recognizing that we are human beings. We are in the people business.
You know what? This might be stating the obvious, but think about, from a development perspective, okay, let's take college athletes, right, that 18 to 22 age range, what they're experiencing so much for the first time, just developmentally. Okay. First time maybe living with a roommate, first time having to go to classes and balance 20 plus hours of their sport and travel and rehab. First time having to like negotiate things on their own, finding, their way to appointments, maybe, or whatever. And then other psychological things might be the first time, like the first time they experience like maybe a loss, like a loss or navigating some kind of ending of something. And so just think about that from a developmental standpoint. Then you put the pressures of their sport on top of everything. It is a lot to navigate. And I think even me sometimes working, I can start to take that for granted until I pull back and be like, wow, this is a lot.
Well,
This,
and to piggyback that, as Janine's talking
yeah.
about, like, I think this is where Ashley and the program that she's doing hey, we're trying to give you some life skills to deal with all these things, right? I think a lot of times we'll throw more resources. No, we got to teach them resourcefulness to be able to navigate this. But as Janine's talking about all those different stresses, we've got more people involved than we ever have, which means we have more people who are trying to help, which means we're asking more of our athletes than we ever have, which means all of these, and as Janine was talking about optimal arousal level, like all of us are trying to do that in our individual areas, yet that's overwhelming for the athlete overall. And so if I'm trying to get a little bit of you in a stretch zone psychologically. I'm trying to get you in a stretch zone physically. I'm trying to get you a stretch zone technically, tactically. I'm trying to get you a stretch zone academically. We had a strength coach I worked with in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Jim Malone, and he would talk about, hey, as we're talking about adding stress to the athlete, if we're all adding stress all the time, like something's going to give, something's going to break. Now we all have to. This is why being a great team comes to play, to say, okay, Janine's doing great work in the psychological space with this athlete. Ashley's doing great work with the life skills standpoint. Well, but how are we ebbing and flowing as far as what we're asking from this athlete at any given time? And sometimes the biggest stress we need to put on them is physically. Sometimes it may be academically. Sometimes, and am I thinking about that more holistically as opposed to just the siloed approach?
Yeah. Love that.
Well,
Janine,
and
sorry,
that,
go ahead.
I was sorry, just to piggyback, how many front offices do that well, bringing every department, and this is again, you might go, okay, Ashley has a lot of pet peeves, but there's some things about communication, and I don't always think that athletics really thinks of themselves as organizations. Like, we're a Fortune 500 company, and how are our communication between departments who have a hand on that player? How are we handling our expectations and support for them? And in a sense that, again, is meeting all requirements, all parties, but everyone is on the same page for that individual to reach their full potential and full max. Like, that's again where I think organizations, the really good ones do it well, because they have the understanding of how is the village pretty much handling one individual at the very most detailed process to try to get the best out of that individual. So again, I think it's going to be important for everyone to understand what the goals are for them to actually work together and achieve that.
Well, and I think we've added complexity to this whole process, making that even harder, right? So, you think about it, you hear stories of, college football coaches who, when they get in with all staff involved, everybody involved, we're not talking too long ago, and there's 20 people in the room, and now you've got staff meetings over 100 people touching the athletes.
Correct.
Let alone the 100 athletes on the roster. So we've added complexity. Oh, and we also obsess over making sure that the 18 to 22-year-olds are a great team, but we don't obsess over the adults in the room being a great team.
Correct.
Because we trust too much, I assume too much, whatever that may be. And so I think to that point is, I worked with a psych in Pittsburgh very smart, impactful guy, John Hammermeister, and he used to always say that cohesion has to be the goal, not a goal. Because if it's a
Correct.
goal, it's going to be pushed to the side. And so for us as a team of professionals, as a coaching staff, whatever else, am I selling out every day to be the most cohesive team in the world, which is
Yeah,
hard, exhausting, additional
it is.
time, whatever else, but we got to
Yeah,
prioritize it, or else there's going to be cracks in different places.
absolutely.
Yeah, Kyle, I was actually going to ask Janine this, but you brought it up, so I'll let you expand on this a little bit more. So you are talking about staff and how many people are involved now with athletes at bigger programs. Um, how do we make sure that they are taken care of? How do we make sure they are getting the support they need? Or do we just expect them that they're going to show up ready to fight the good fight every day and that they don't need any support?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'd love to hear how Janine does this at Colorado with the coaches. I think as a leader of an organization, I believe firmly you can't give away what you don't possess yourself. And so if I'm not I mean, there's as we've gotten way smarter at coach development over the years, and we've learned a ton of things. One thing that it was an old school maxim, if you will, of coaching that I think we've lost sight of is that the team will take on the identity of the coach. The biggest influence I have on the people I'm leading is me. How do I carry myself? How do I practice peak performance? Am I as intentional with my rest and recovery as I am with my stress? Am I trying to grow and get better as a coach or leader? Am I willing to risk and try, accept, admit when I've failed, learn from it, whatever else? Those lessons. So am I modeling the behavior I want to instill in others? Which means then I need to make sure that I've both selected and hired people, but also am creating an environment where those same expectations happen on them. And so I would argue that if you want to have a great development culture, it starts with your leaders. And before I ask a bunch of players to have development plans, I better have a development plan. My people better have a development. My coaches, the adults in the room, better have development plans. And that's going to look different for different people. Again, I think sometimes we try to cookie cutter some of this, but at least there's an expectation of development for ourselves, which allows us to then pour out to the player. Last thing I'll say, I'd love to hear how Janine approaches it in her space. I think coaches, leaders, it's just easy for us to constantly pour out. And my responsibility is to be my best when my best is needed. I don't know if day 1 or day 180 is when that kid is going to be ready to hear what I have to say. And I need to make sure I'm ready to deliver that message in the right way, that I'm not exhausted, tired, frustrated, whatever else, and I'm able to deliver it, or else I might miss that window. And so what am I doing to put myself in that position every day? Which is hard because there's a lot of competing interests.
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about coaches' development plans. And the challenge that we have, and my guess is other programs have it too, is the time we have to do that is in the summer, right? It's off season, it's downtime, but then it flies right in the face of like, okay, I want to get away, I want to rest, I want to not be here, I want to not come to campus. So then we have to try to sell that like this development, training, skill development, reflecting on your own. I love how you said your own health and wellness, your own leadership style, how you're modeling taking feedback, how you're modeling communication. Like, that has to get modeled, right? And so I find a tension between that, because we have the summer months and then it's season and then kind of forget about it, right? So that's something I'm working through, just in all honesty, like of how to approach that. We have to sell it that this will actually be helpful in the long term, right?
I'd love to hear both Janine and Ashley maybe share their where there's some examples of where you guys have experienced this, because I think the best development cultures are doing development 24/7. It's not like, okay, when I have some time, I'm going to go try to learn this skill, as opposed to, no, I'm incorporating it into every day. How am I getting better? There are times where it's like, hey, there's a specific skill I want to move forward, and the summer is when to do that.
Yeah.
But generally, what am I doing? How am I approaching this? I'd just be curious to hear, both of you, how you've partnered with coaches to maybe help them do that in the thick of it, not waiting for some other time.
I will say I'm in development with that. No,
Awesome.
Brandon.
I was on the edge of my seat because I was really curious how you handle, your coaching staffs at Colorado. So I was very intrigued on how you're handling one of them at least. But I would say, to your point, this is you spoke so much truth, because I continue to reflect and see what I say is the grown children, because we have the children and then we have the grown children, and they have their own stuff. They have their own trauma. They have their own hiccups. And I don't honestly think that, I think culturally, maybe the university or the organization, tries to instill that all head coaches and programs, we live by our standards and that's how we hold ourselves. And granted, yeah, with the AD, he hires who he believes is going to be a KU fit, But again, I say this all the time, in the sense that I manage over 100 of the young kids, of the younger. But there needs to be a me or a Janine for the coaching staff. And like, sometimes I feel like I'm in between, because coaches will come to me and I'm like, okay, am I now in the coaching realm of this? But it's so true that they have so much. They're human. Granted, they have their own off the field issues and, not very healthy, behaviors at times. And so, but then they're going to support and help the younger person. I'm like, how is that really going to work out? But to your point, I don't think we have enough influence when it comes to our coaches and our leaders to say, you know what, you need to define, you need to manage, and you need to model yourself before you are leading anyone else. And if they can't define, manage, and model what they are preaching or telling this 20-year-old to do, it's like talking out of both sides of the mouth. And this generation, they're going to see right through it, and they're not going to buy in anyway. You know what I mean? Like, these athletes right now, they want straight up, they want truth, and they're going to see someone not walk the walk, and they're going to, okay, be respectful because they have to in that sense, but they're going to really know the truth on what that individual is or is not doing. And so I say, for someone in my position to help assist, head coach, coordinators, assistant coaches, analysts, the staff, or Janine, even our clinical therapist, even if she met with them. Now, she doesn't have time. We're really maxed out. But again, in the sense that the staff should have the same support and same resources as what we're trying to do for the team itself. And if you're not willing to work on yourself, then you're going to be hard pressed for this 21-year-old to really take you seriously and run through a wall for you, or listen to anything that you really have to say, unless he sees it as his ticket to achieve what they're needing to do. But again, I think that's really hard, because we're in a transactional type world at times, where we have very little time, a short window of, getting someone in this program. If they're especially a transfer, when they have 1 or 2 years with like, that has to be modeled every single day. And so what we do with our program is we do culture meetings every single week, which again, define, because everyone is going to have a lot of noise coming in, but we have to be consistent with our messaging, with what we stand for, and with what the team's goals are every week. How do we create that? And we often remind our guys, worry about the process, don't worry about the result. If you worry about the process and the root, the fruit will grow. But you have to hit them daily with those cues, because again, they're going to get a lot of noise from family, from media, from community, from friends. And so we have to be at least consistent with our messaging if we're going to stand a chance with trying to create the team to buy in.
So we're coming close to the end of our time here, and the three of you have been incredible panelists. I was actually going to be a panelist, but I didn't have to say anything because all of you are contributing so much. And honestly, we could go on for hours about this, but for sake of time, because all three of you are incredibly busy, along with our audience. Janine, I wanted to start with you first. You have 30 to 60 seconds of a closing statement about athlete identity, and it could be around anything within athlete identity and why it's important.
I'll just wrap it up that college athletics can significantly shape psychological development, but I think what will optimize that is supportive coaching that models it, mental health resources, and accessing that, and I think balanced expectations in that process of development will optimize the opportunity.
Ashley, what about you?
I mean, I couldn't say it any better than Janine. I think to that point, she hit on all realms. I don't want to really take any other points. I just say consistency is going to be key for anything. If that head coach or any one of us in a director or position of leading young people, consistency is going to be key for any of them to really look at you and actually buy into what you're trying to help them with.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyle, we'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, I think just to echo the comments been made here, I think the principles of great coaching, great development, I don't think those have changed at all. I think we have more noise. I think we've got more distractions. It may look a little different, but if anything, just the floor has been risen, and we need it more than ever. And I will say that if we sell out and commit to those, I think you win way more games. It's not a one or the other. This isn't a trade-off. The recipe is the recipe. It hasn't changed. There's more distractions. It's harder than ever. And I do think it's the best recipe for increasing your chances of success on how the world evaluates sport.